Hello, and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those that produce it. My name is Jeane Slone. I am the host. I have written 2 historical fictions, She Flew Bombers During World War II, and She Built Ships During World War II. I'm also a distributor of local authors' books. I would like to welcome in the studio today, Dietrich Stroeh. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It is quite an intimate book that Dietrich has written. It is titled 3 Months, A Caregiving Journey from Heartbreak to Healing. Mr. Stroeh has written 2 books. The first book he wrote was The Man Who Made It Rain. Could you please just briefly tell us about that book? This book just came out, so we're very interested in this book. But The Man Who Made It Rain, what is that book about?
Well, back in 1976-77, I was general manager of Marin Municipal Water District. And we literally were running out of water. And if we hadn't built a pipeline across Richmond Bridge and got some emergency water, we would have been out of water in July of 1977 for 170,000 people. So anyway, it's the whole story of how that all came about, what we went through, and it's really that simple. It's got a lot of other things in it, but it's kind of patterned after Perfect Storm, the book Perfect Storm, where it jumps from different places and different things, but all comes together at the end.
Wow, sounds very fascinating. Can you give us a little background about your educational and professionalism?
Well, I'm a graduate civil engineer. I'm registered in the state of California. My first part of my career, I worked for a water agency and became its general manager for 7 years. Then left that and created an engineering firm in Nevada. And it's civil engineering, we do all kinds of different types of good stuff, and kind of been involved in the community, been involved in all kinds of different things. I'm on 6 different boards, and I'm on the Golden Gate Bridge District Board. That's one of the neat ones.
Yeah, especially these days, there's a lot of talk about going through the bridge.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
I found this book to be practical, yet it was very sensitive. It is a love story and a guidebook, which makes it really practical to read. Right. It is emotional and sensitive. I was really curious, how long had your wife passed away when you thought about writing this book?
Actually, I didn't think about writing a book for a long time. But what happened was, very simply, in the evenings when I wasn't in meetings and what have you, I would sit at my desk and just start writing notes, putting notes down as to what occurred during the 3 months from the time she was diagnosed to the time she died. And various subjects. It could be how the cats reacted to her illness, to what's it like to sit around in the hospital, how we were able to move her out, look at her flowers, and do it just randomly all over the place. And about 2/3 of the way through that, I said to myself, you know, maybe we ought to put this into a book in some fashion that might help other people that have to go through it, that they're not alone. And so I met up with Bill Maher, a good friend of mine who's a writer, and he helped me put all this together. And to answer your question, I'm around the Robin Hood's barn here, but to answer your question, we didn't actually start writing this thing for about 8 months after she died. But just going through writing all these notes down, and there was a lot of tears that came with that. And I had my administrative assistant type them up, and they became the basis of the book itself.
So you actually started writing for probably therapeutic reasons.
Exactly. And I just to take things out of my head, get them out of my head that were sitting there for you know, and did a lot of crying during that process.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I know an engineer's personality is really kind of a fix-it type personality. A lot of men, you know, they just want to fix it. Don't tell me your problems, just give me a brief account, I'll fix it. How did that type of personality of being an engineer, how was it helpful when your wife had, you found out your wife had terminal pancreatic cancer?
Well, and it's a good point, because I think in some ways it was very helpful. I knew I couldn't fix it. I knew there was no way of fixing it. But you always have that business of hope, and hope maybe something will happen, maybe something will change. Well, it doesn't going to change. So as far as the engineering, what was good about it was I was able to, the peripheral stuff of taking care of her, the setting up the beds, the hospital bed, getting a room squared away, and doing a lot of different things that went towards helping her to be comfortable. And I was able to do that. Also, I had my stepdaughter with me for some time. She was very helpful, and we worked together with Margaret. And but I learned a lot. And there's no training on something like this, caregiving. Absolutely no training. And so you're kind of learning as you go, and you're learning all kinds of medical stuff that you never thought you'd ever do. And that was helpful to have the engineering background.
Between the two of you, you had how many children?
5.
5. And I was curious as to what was it like for the 5 children to watch their mother disappear?
Sad, but every one of them are pragmatic enough to not fall apart. All of them were very helpful, always there to pick up pieces if we need some help. I have 2 of them that live close by. One of them's up in Portland, one's in Texas, and one's in Vermont. The one in Vermont, she was with me for quite a while. That's the stepdaughter. And it was, she was very helpful, but she was learning too at the same time. What was neat about it, we were able in the evening, when Margaret was asleep, to sit there and talk. And she's a history buff, and I'm a history buff. Oh. So it was great that way. Mm-hmm.
So the family did pull together.
Oh yes, very definitely.
So that doesn't always happen.
No, but they were always there, always there. And they always left the decisions up to Margaret and me, or eventually me. Yet they would give me advice and what have you, but we worked.
You were very fortunate that there
very much so.
Wasn't a lot of dissent going on.
No. The only thing that happened was at the last month of her life, she was in the hospital, and the question came up, should she continue with chemotherapy and stay in the hospital or come home? So I sat there, the 2 of the children were in the room. So I talked to Margaret, I says, what do you think? She says, what do you think? And I says, I think we ought to go home. And she says, I think you're right. Her son felt very uncomfortable with that. He didn't think we could take care of her. And you know what? That last month was the best quality that she got of the 3 months. Mm-hmm. Kind of interesting. She was able to watch movies, she was able to do things. I moved her out in the yard or around her flowers. It was just, and if there is a good time, it was a good time.
That is a nice way to pass away, if it's so possible. I just imagine it with my life. I really love where I live, and I think about, I would like to just pass away here, not
Yeah.
in a hospital.
Right, right. Well, that's one of the things in speaking to groups and what have you, I didn't know how to handle it. And at first, the hospital thing's always involved. And I thought, best of all worlds, just to have her at home, take care of her, and go from there. Because the hospitals, as much as they do good, they also can be very, very depressing,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So,
I was curious, did the doctors, do they actually tell you she has only 3 months?
no. Well, when we first sat down with Dr. Metzger, first place, when we were told what she was diagnosed with, and they told us the extent of the tumors in her abdominal cavity, we knew fully well that was the end. But we didn't know how much time she had, none of that. Then we met with the oncologist, Dr. Metzger, and he said she probably has 9 months to a year with chemo. So that was one thing. The problem was that the fact that the cancer had affected her large bowel, and we didn't know that. And in effect, she couldn't eliminate. And that took another 3 weeks to figure that out. And they finally did surgery, a bypass surgery, so that she could eliminate into a bag. And I had to learn how to take care of that, which no one teaches that. And the interesting thing about it is that when they were teaching me how to take care of it, how to clean the area and empty the bag and all the good stuff that goes with it, I was nervous. I was so nervous I thought I'd screw it up somehow or another. And the nurse, when I finally did it, she said, "That was great. I've never seen anybody do it that well." And she gives me a high five.
It's getting instant nursing training.
Right, and something that no one really wants to talk about. No one wants to, it's just, and this part of that was that Margaret was unbelievably fastidious. And she just lived with it, and at one point in time, I know it's going to sound screwy, but I take her out of the bed and put her on the potty so she could urinate, and that was a time when I cleaned the bag. And she looked down at me one time and she says, "Do you know what you're doing?" And I said, "Why? Sure I know what I'm doing. You want to do it?" No. It looks like you know what you're doing."
She was surprised. Huh?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of humor, too, that floated through all this. And I made sure it was there for her and for me.
You wrote about humor.
Yeah.
And how very important it is.
Oh. And it's okay to laugh. It's okay to cry. It's okay to hug somebody. It's okay to do all those emotions that you're going to go through. And I've had more men say to me, "I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it. I don't know if I could do that." I said, "You do. You will go through it. You will." So it's that's why I wrote it.
Yeah. Were you able to continue to work during the time?
Yeah. That's one of the other pieces of it. I kept busy. Not only we were working, taking care of, there were periods of time during a day that I could drift off to the office and take care of some stuff off the computer at home. I could work on it, work with it. So that was very helpful. And then especially after she died, I was only kind of semi-retired and only working 3 days a week at the office, but I went full-time just to keep busy. And that is the key to all of this, just keeping busy. If you sit there watching television, you won't make it.
It seems when you go and visit people in the hospital, that's all there seems to be is television.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true, yeah.
We usually think more about women being in the caregiving position, which is why this book is so valuable. What kind of advice could you personally give men more than women about being in this sad situation that you found yourself in?
I think the key is meeting it head on, accepting the fact that your loved one is going to pass away and die. It's hard to do, but you have to. Hug people, cry with them. Don't worry about that type of thing. I happen to be one of those type of people that hug anyway, so it worked well for me. But the other piece of it is I think my engineering background helped me get through a lot of stuff because I could kind of logically put things into a box while it's all going on. Learn to live and work with the information you're given from the doctors, the nurses, and all this. You ask questions, you make notes, but don't walk away from it. Look straight at it and say, okay, how am I going to make her as comfortable as I can?
And you talk about hugging, and men do hug sometimes.
Oh yeah.
There's some men who don't.
No.
I remember my father, and I had 3 brothers, and he would always just shake their hand. I always found that so peculiar. I'd get a hug, but they got the shake.
I know. But you're seeing...
Now, I understand the hugging for men, because some men do the hugging, but so rarely do you see men cry.
And that's a good point. I just went through an experience here just the last 2 or 3 weeks with one of my employees who just lost his brother. So I walked over to him. He was sitting at his desk, and I walked over and I put my arm around his shoulders, and I said, "I'm really sorry about your brother, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you stand up so I can give you a hug?" And he looked at me and says, "I don't hug."
Oh.
And I says, "Greg, if you don't hug, it'll fester inside of you. Mm-hmm. Reach out to people." So I says, "Okay, there's a lady that's called Robin sitting next near or across from him." I said, "Robin, you give him a hug." She says, he won't let me do that." So yes, you're right. There's men that do that, and I don't know how they're going to handle it. Just I guess they keep it inside of them. I couldn't.
I think the key to telling men is that if you don't hug and if you don't cry, then you have the festering, and I think that's what you have really put across well.
Right, yeah. And I think that's the key to it, and that's also I was able to get through the 6 or 8 months worth of grieving as well as I could. And the funny part, every day I think of her. Every day I think of something we did together. Every day I think of something neat that we did, or even the bad times. But as you well know, reading the book, I found another person, and now I'm remarried, and all works out.
Yeah, you never know. Life has a lot of twists and turns as you get older.
That's right.
In your book, what's the practical side, you have tips and rules that people can follow in the caregiving role. Can you tell us about some of those?
Well, I think one of them, we have a whole chapter on waiting. And what the things you need to do when you're in the hospital. You've got to not just sit and watch television, but maybe bring a book or find something to read or converse with people or whatever it takes to keep busy, keep your mind active. Another piece of it is that when you're speaking to one of the professionals, the doctors or the nurses or whatever, take notes, ask questions, because when you leave that office, when you get home, you'll say, "Geez, I wonder what I do about this." Well, you should have asked the question when you were there so you get the answer, because you're not going to be given, no matter how well a professional works, they're not going to know what's going on in your head. And it's critical for you to do that, because there's going to be things that happen that you don't, whoa, how did that, why did that happen?
I think people really have to be told that it's okay to bring a notebook.
Oh, yes. Very
It's
definitely.
okay to
Oh,
write
yeah.
down what they're saying.
Right, right, no
They're
question.
so hard to get a hold of if you forgot.
Right. Oh yes. Oh yes. It's and that's totally real. It's not a negative. It's just the way it is. And you get different reactions from different professionals. And I remember one nurse. She came in to do something when we first found out that she had the cancer. She was in the hospital, and somehow or another, conversation came around to how long all this was going to take, and this nurse very simply said, well, don't you know? You may be here, you may just die here. And I couldn't believe it, neither could, of course, neither did Margaret. And I looked at her and I says, I don't think we need to hear that right now. We haven't talked to Dr. Metzger. Well, it's a given that she's going to die pretty quick. And I thought, and what kind of care is that? Now that was the only time it ever happened. Only time it ever happened.
It was fortunate you were quick to respond to
Yes.
somebody
Yeah.
saying that, and that you were able to say the right thing back, especially for your wife.
Yep, that's exactly it. And one of the interesting things about all this is that we never talked about death. Margaret and I never talked about it. She knew she was going to die. In the book, as you know, there's a little bit of diary that she wrote.
Yeah, I was so amazed that you had her bits and pieces of her diary in the book.
Yeah.
What was that like to read her diary?
Well, I didn't read it till after she died. I didn't know she wrote it. And I found it, and it it blew me away. Absolutely, just blew me away. And because she did write diaries, she had diaries. Every year she wrote a diary about stuff going on a daily basis, and so it was easy for her. And but she couldn't write after 3 or 4 days. That was it. So.
How long did it take you to recover, would you say, after Margaret passed away?
I don't know if I've recovered yet. You put it what I call in the historic mind. You put it in the memory mind, and that's what I've done. I would say that the actual pain and emptiness was 8 months. Because I remember waking up one morning, getting out of bed, and I'm standing there thinking, well, what's wrong? Something's wrong. I'm not feeling, something's going on. All of a sudden I realized that pain and that emptiness was gone. Not the memory, but that part of it.
But you did remarry.
Yes.
So how has your new wife, has she experienced what you've experienced?
No. She's a lot younger than I am, but none of her family, well, her grandparents passed away, but other than that, and that was a long time ago, but not her immediate family. So, and my parents passed away, my 2 sisters passed away with cancer, and so I'm very familiar with you might say, the process, if that's the way to put it, that there's all these things you have to do, and you have to make arrangements of all kinds of stuff, and so that part I was able to do. But my wife now, she's read the book, she liked the book, she understands perfectly, that's a piece of history now, and our relationship is very, very good. In fact, I was just talking a little while ago, I says, I remember the interview, this television interview, so I wish I could be there. And she's a realist.
Well, it's very fortunate that you did write a book that she could read rather than pressuring, let's say, a new husband for, well, what were your feelings? What were your feelings?
Yeah. Well, she read it all, and her whole family's now read it. In fact, her one sister said to me, I know more about you now than I did before I read the book. So.
A book can tell you more, which is why I know you said you started writing in the first place. It wasn't to write a book. It was a way to express your feelings.
That's exactly it. And As I said, it could have been about any subject. I remember looking at the cats. We have 2 cats. And one evening, and I just start putting down their names and what they did during the day with her, with Margaret, and they would sit on the end of the bed and watch her, just like they knew what was going to happen, but they just watched her. But they were there as a comfort for her, and they would lay next to her, sleep next to her while she was asleep, and it was a comfort to her. And we rolled her out, and she was watching television, or we were watching a movie. I have quite a movie library, and they would sit on our lap. So it was all good. Mm-hmm. But I wrote about that, just that.
Cats purring can really work wonders.
That's right, that's right. We never talked about death. It was always looking forward, if you will. Always the point in time that you sit there and you're watching a movie, and she totally loved watching movies. And there was a time when she didn't understand what was going on anymore, but she still sat there with that smile on her face. And did she understand what's going on? I don't know, maybe she did, maybe she didn't. It didn't matter. So.
I would like to personally thank you for writing this book. I think it's going to be a very valuable tool for a lot of people. And we're very grateful that you're able to share your feelings, that it is written by a man can be a very helpful experience.
Well, thank you for having me here doing this. It's in fact, I was going through it the other day again, or yesterday actually, and I start crying all over again. So it's not a sad book, but it is. So.
Yeah, you have your humor in it.
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
your practicality in it.
Right.
And the sadness. So
Right.
there's really quite a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
Please check the Community Media Center's website for the next episode of WriterSpeak. I also would like to thank our sponsor, the Sonoma County Gazette.